Doctors and nurses of Reddit, have you ever witnessed a couple have a child that was obviously not the father's? What happened? This couple had been married only a few months back. A month or so into the marriage, the lady had told him that she was carrying someone else's child. The husband was okay with the pregnancy as long as the child was given up for adoption. Twins were born and the mother died birthing them. The twins were given up for adoption to an orphanage that had associated itself with a hospital. Doctor here wasn't my patient, it was my daughter. I knew the moment she crowned and had confirmation after state mandated testing came back within the next couple weeks. I chose to raise her regardless, but the last couple years have been, shall we say, challenging. This was like 25 years ago. I went to the hospital with a friend the night his son was born. This guy was a straight up surfer dude with nearly white blonde hair. To make a long story short, his son was as black as night. To his credit, he didn't care. I recall him saying, "F it, we'll figure this S out. That's my boy." Went to a delivery during residency, pediatrician, and the white mother was screaming I didn't have sex with no black man. I ain't no Enga sucker over and over and over. Her baby was very black, also addicted to H. She had some issues. Holy crap. Not a doctor or nurse, but I was doing a client's immigration application and the government requested a DNA test for all the kids. There were like 5 I believe. Paternity test came back negative for 2 of the kids. The application was withdrawn. Not a medical worker, but my married-in uncle's mom is one of 5 sisters from Brooklyn, NY. One Christmas a couple years ago, one of the sisters got them 23andMe kits. When you send in your information, you can opt in to be notified if similar DNA is found to like find distant relatives and stuff. Only one of the sisters got the result saying she was related to this family. Let's call them the Romano family. All of the sisters were really confused as to why the youngest sister was the only one to get this result, until one of them goes, "Hey, wasn't there a Romano family that lived on the apartment floor above us growing up?" When they asked their mom about this, now in her 80s, she simply lit a cigarette and told them that the test was full of crap and to never bother her with it again. Not a doctor or nurse, just have a family story. Before I met my husband's 2 cousins, he explained to me how his uncle had got with their mother during an overlap period, and they always knew there was a chance the older girl might not be biologically his, but nobody in the family wanted to know for sure. As far as everyone was concerned, she was his daughter and that was that. So I meet the cousins. My husband is Asian. His uncle is Asian. The younger of the girls is clearly half Asian. The older one, with her white skin, blue eyes and fair hair, looks very much like her mother. I'm half Japanese with very strong Japanese genes. Very dark hair, dark brown eyes, and I had a kid with a white guy, curly light brown hair, blue eyes. My kid is now 4 with tan hair, blue eyes. I look like an Asian stepmom to my own kid. Can I tell you my terrible story as the pregnant lady? I was with my boyfriend. We found out I was pregnant and were so excited. Then we went in to see an ultrasound and heartbeat. The doc said when I got pregnant, and my boyfriend decided that couldn't be his because it was right around when we first started, you know. He argued that it was from the end of when I was dating my previous boyfriend. I told him that I had stopped dating him before the date they gave us, and look though texts to confirm. Still didn't believe me. Spent my whole pregnancy without having someone to be excited with. Gave birth and recovered alone. Eventually broke up with him. Got tested with my previous BF and guess what? I was right all along. This guy missed the birth of his first son all because he didn't trust me. We could have had a baby together and been happy, but he threw it away. Now I'm raising his son alone. Not a nurse. Well, yet. But this is a personal story. My youngest sister is my half sister, as my mom got pregnant while my dad and her were separated. Shortly after they got back together, and my dad decided to raise her as his own, being that the biological father did not want to be involved. At church one afternoon, shortly after the birth of my little sister, a family member was holding her and exclaimed, "Oh wow, look at her. She looks just like her, my dad's last name, baby." My dad immediately left the church after hearing this. My mother rushed outside looking to console him, worried he'd been hurt. Instead she found him outside laughing his ass off. They are divorced now, but my baby sister has had a loving father all her life, and 2 divorced but amazing co-parents. Sometimes it works out. I was able to witness a birth for my pre-med volunteering. Of course the one time I'm able to. This ginger, hair color, they're pale and freckled, couple has a black child. The dude was probably just happy that he was able to have a child with a soul. Just a personal story. When I was around 13-14, my girlfriend told me she was pregnant. I didn't know what to do. It was a rough few weeks. Our plan was to have an abortion, but she had a miscarriage. Fast forward to age 24, I'm married and we're trying to have a kid. Nothing is happening. I go to the doctor to get a sperm count. The nurse, eating an apple and clearly irritated, tells the doctor that there are plenty of them swimming around in there. So, my wife went to get checked. No problem found. Back to me. I go to a new doctor and he examines me. In about 12 seconds he identifies that my vas deferens ends prematurely. I was, basically, born with a vasectomy. Everything else is normal, but without a medical procedure, I had zero chance of fathering a child. It was an odd feeling finding out that my childhood girlfriend had cheated on me and gotten pregnant 10 years ago, and also that I could have safely skipped buying a few condoms. Oh, and that the nurse outright lied to all of us, causing several more months of misery. If it makes you feel better, your girlfriend was probably lying. I'm 24 as well, and I remember 16 and pregnant being all the hype at that age, and girls trying to get pregnant or lying that they were and miscarrying for drama. I'm not a doctor or a nurse, but a white female friend I had known since we were kids together got married to a white military man. He was stationed in Korea, so she went to visit him for a couple of months. Upon her return she informed us she was pregnant. We were all happy for them. My other friends and I put our money on her having a Korean baby. We were all quite shocked when she had the baby, and it was a black baby boy. Beautiful child, but threw us all for a loop. Her husband filed for an annulment the next day. LOL. I didn't work at Obgyn, but sorta related. When I got pregnant, we had to do blood tests to make sure I didn't have Rh neg blood, because many in my family do. My son's father found out that his blood type was B+. His mother's blood type is O+, and his father's is A+. It is impossible that his father was actually his biological father. Not a doctor, but a child from this exact situation. My mom used to sleep around a lot when she was a teenager. She already had 1 kid before me and continued to do so. When I was conceived, she was only hooking up with 1 man at a time, supposedly. When my mom gave birth to me, I came out extremely pale with red hair and blue eyes. My mother is Italian with brown hair and brown eyes. Meanwhile, the guy she slept with was Filipino with black hair and brown eyes. My mom immediately told the dude to leave since it was obvious he wasn't the father. He was devastated and tried to contact her, but nothing happened. Fast forward 2 years later, my face started to grow more and more like Asian dude. My mom contacted him and they immediately got a DNA test. It turns out, he was actually my dad, and I somehow got all of the recessive genes in my family. My parents ended up having my sister that looks exactly like my mom. My dad ordered a DNA test again since there was no sign of the dad in her. Turns out she was his. My mom admitted she was sleeping around the whole marriage after the DNA test was ordered at the hospital. Another big scene with the exact same scenario, but this time they filed for divorce too. Yes, there was suspicion before the birth, and the baby was clearly another ethnicity. The dad was asking how to get paternity testing throughout the night. Most of us were not 100% sure of the process, so he just kept asking everyone if the hospital could do it for him. Honestly, it was just sad. Birth is usually such a happy time, and so to watch a relationship quietly crumple and witness a child born into an unstable situation is just so heartbreaking. This question makes me wonder what the reaction was for my partner's mom and her husband, who isn't the father. She knew early on, but waited to tell my partner until he was 27. His bio dad has been living down the block wanting to be a part of his life the whole time, but mom made certain that didn't happen. She even denied his sisters when they tried reaching out. Some women, man. My neighbor just across the street met a girl I think at a bar where they play at. He's a guitarist. and later that night took her home, but before that he asked her age. She said she was 18. Then after a week she returned and told him she was pregnant. Now when he told this to us, me, my mom and my brother became really suspicious, cause here in my country being a teen mom is a no-no. You'll get stigmatized, to put it lightly. But this girl just broke that news like it's nothing. Now fast forward a few weeks, the mom gets involved, and this is where things get real crazy. She told him that her daughter was actually 13 and that if he didn't foot the hospital checkup bills she will report him to the police. But my neighbor couldn't do that as he's broke. So after a couple trips to the hospital and maybe finally realizing he doesn't have any money, she stops. Then one day that girl dropped the bombshell on our neighbor. She probably felt guilty cause he was nice. She told him that he's actually not the father of the child, that it was her stepdad's. Turns out the dad was a drug addict and the girl was being molested for years now every time her mom was away. And he wasn't the first they tried to extort money from. Good thing he was poor. Younger brother married his live-in girlfriend when she became pregnant. Traveled across country to be present at the baptism, and the child was beautiful but obviously mixed race. My brother had no part in this. As I was standing at the bassinet looking at this child and lost in thought, the in-laws and wife surrounded me and began to try to convince me that the child was born with a liver disorder that accounted for her dark skin and kinky hair. Can I say that? A weird conversation on so many levels. 1. Was there a stupid sign over my head? 2. What were their story plans going to be as this beautiful little girl grew older? 3. If you love this child, why would you lie about who she is? Fast forward to today, a brilliant young lady with a full academic scholarship to university. She is married and does not want to have children out of fear they will obviously be from the other side of the fence. The irony is that she is a child welfare specialist. If you stop to think how screwed up most of us are, you just don't want to get out of bed each day. Not a nurse, but my ex had the opposite with our son. He looks a lot like me, but has traces of his mom. My ex is native Honduran and I'm very German East Euro. She would walk with a friend who had a baby girl at the same time and everyone thought they were twins. Even my son asked me, "Mommy doesn't look like us." I can only imagine the face of the doctor and nurses that delivered a family member's baby, and the baby came out very obviously mixed. He tried telling us while they were together that he thinks she was cheating, but we brushed it off and said no way. Not exactly the situation, but we are adopting a wonderful little girl. During the process, we have to make sure that we also work with the father to sort out parental rights on that side of things. The bio mother has brought 5 potential daddies into the test and all of them failed. We actually met 2 of them by accident, and they both seemed rather excited to be fathers, and seemed really into this whole "I'm going to be a daddy" thing. I can't imagine being so out there that 5 potential daddies have failed paternity. Not a doctor and I'm sure this will get buried, but a very light version of this happened to me. My daughter is now 1 year old. She is my 3rd baby but my SO's first. The 2 older boys are from my previous relationship. When my daughter was born, she was jaundice, so her skin tone was pretty olive colored. Me and dad are both white enough that you could toss us in the snow and not find us till spring. Dad was very suspicious and eventually started crying because he didn't want to accuse me of cheating but insisted she didn't look like him. She very much now is her father's twin. No doubt about it. LOL. Everything turned out fine. She is as stark white as can be. LOL. I reassured him she was just kinda yellow from jaundice and offered to let him take a paternity test to put himself at ease. I'm a nurse and there's always rumors about nurses sleeping with the doctors. Well, there was this one nurse who had just gotten married and there was a rumor that she was caught in the doctor's lounge having sex with another doctor. Shortly after that she was fired and a couple months after that she announces on FB that she's pregnant. Well, the other day some of the nurses and I were looking her up on Facebook to see what she was up to, and her son is the spitting image of the doctor she was rumored to be having an affair with. He looks nothing like her husband. She is still with her husband and they had another baby. I can't imagine being married to someone and knowing that you've had a kid by another man and letting your husband think otherwise. I do have sort of reverse of the story. My pregnant wife was about to undergo her second Rogam shot. It's given to Rh negative women to eliminate the effects they would have if they have a blood invasive procedure with an Rh positive baby. She asked why they didn't test me, and they gave her 2 reasons. 1. It's a small percentage of men that are Rh negative. 17% don't remember. 2. It is not best medical practice to assume the husband is the father. And what are they going to do? Ask her? We found it funny. I was tested and I am Rh negative. So she convinced them there was no other possible father and could forego further shots. We had a beautiful, Rh negative, little girl. My brother and I, supposedly, have the same dad. However, he was never in our lives. We've seen pictures and I look pretty similar to him. My brother does not. My brother got a job as a ranch hand and one of his co-workers actually dated my mom back in the day. My brother sent me a picture. This guy is identical to my brother, except maybe 25 years older. I asked him if he was going to tell our mom, but he doesn't want to upset her. Not a doctor, but worked in the pharmacy. Husband went downstairs after the baby was delivered. He took the commercial chair and tossed it into the window, shattering it in the waiting area. It was Christmas season too, so that didn't help. Everyone was cold with the chilly winds coming in. I wonder what would happen to the wife afterwards. Both my parents are half Maori. They're both darker skinned, with dark hair and dark eyes. I came out white blonde, blue eyes, very pale. All my life people have thought I was adopted, or that my mum had an affair. One grandparent on each side is white, so I guess that swung back to me. As I've gotten older my hair darkened up and I look a bit more like some of my siblings, so it's not as bad as it used to be. I've gotten used to the comments, but it has been a source of frustration for me throughout my life and was the source of a lot of feelings of not belonging. Being mixed race is super fun. I have no doubt I am in fact my dad's daughter. I have his features more than anyone else in the family. Not completely related, but when I studied medicine, we had a short course in genetics at the genetics faculty, which also did genetic testing for the university's hospital, and they told us that in 10% of the cases the subject thought were their dad, wasn't their bio dad, and they didn't do paternity tests at this lab. This was strictly health related or forensic testing. A neighbor Caucasian couple, the woman gave birth to an obviously African American baby girl, confirmed our suspicions that the dude either pimped her out for drugs or she cheated. She's not the cheating type and he's a piece of crap. Their first kid is special needs but is able to keep up in school. The little girl is now 3 and so freaking precious. She's so sweet, cute, well adjusted, and just seems like a good human. The guy is an abusive C. She's talked to my mom about it. He's been abusive to their son and to her. She has mentioned several times about instances where she is forced to sleep on the floor. The kids aren't allowed outside. We can hear screaming, arguing. He's a known drug dealer and the cops have been called numerous times. She can't afford to leave him, in her view, and is afraid of how he will react. She's taken trips to her parents, about 2k miles away, but always comes back. She's not perfect but she's definitely a victim. I had a 12-year-old girl come in having contractions. She was very fair-skinned, red hair, freckles and definitely 9 months along and in labor. Her parents arrived with her explaining that her father was a superintendent and her mother a teacher. They desperately wanted no information of this pregnancy get out, which I assured them was no problem. Mom and dad were off to the waiting room when up to the desk came this slight, equally pale, curly-haired kid who couldn't have been much older than 12 himself. He asked to see the young girl and I told him I couldn't even tell him whether she was there or not. He then told me he was her BF and I explained it didn't matter. So he headed to our waiting room. About 30 minutes later, a big, tall, very muscular man, whose skin looked like creamy milk chocolate came in and asked about the young girl in labor. Said he was her gym teacher. I once again relayed the no information clause and he headed to the room where the others were waiting. I resumed my attention on the girl, asking her if there was anyone she wanted in the berth with her and she asked for her parents. So, when she'd begun pushing, I had an assistant get her parents ready to go in. Long story short, Baby was born healthy and with a very dark complexion. Looked like gym teacher was the baby daddy. Mom's father suddenly went red and then her mother began to faint. We caught her and hustled both of them out of the room and sent them to postpartum. I said nothing to the young boy or the gym teacher and hurried back to the delivery room where I'd left mom baby with the nursery nurse. Doc had retrieved a cord blood sample and I cleaned up mom and took her to postpartum. The other nurse took baby to the nursery for intake. I then called the cops and caught up on paperwork so it'd look like everything was okay. When the police arrived, I had paperwork ready for them, DNA orders, and cord blood, which has to pass through legal channels only. They cuffed the gym teacher and took him away. Just as the new mom's father came into the hall yelling, "You're fired," the young boy left in tears. I feel so bad for that little girl. I hope her and the baby turned out fine. It's dangerous for a 12-year-old to even carry a full-term pregnancy. May the gym teacher rot in jail. I think that it is not always immediately obvious if a child is not fully white. My children are half white and half black and I remember that when they were first born their skin was very light and turned bronzier over the next few months and their hair was straight and brown. With our first child she had complications and she was in a medically induced coma for a week and our son was transferred to a larger hospital for the NICU and I would visit him every day. When she got to come see him after she was released, our nurse told us that she was very surprised because she didn't realize our son wasn't fully white. Not a medical professional but I'll share this. My grandfather had 4 wives and 7 children. My grandma was his 3rd wife and gave birth to 5 of his children, the last of which was blonde, so my grandfather went to his grave 40 or so years later still thinking that the son wasn't his. After his son was murdered, not by him and long before he himself passed, he chose to leave him in an unmarked grave because he was buried with his ex-wife and not his child anyway, which infuriated me to no end. The kicker here is when I did ancestry DNA tests from multiple sites, I am 99.8% European and 50% is German on my granddad's side. But he essentially disowned his own kid for being blonde because his other kids weren't. My youngest sister was later born looking like a female carbon copy of my uncle. My grandfather was smart too as he was an engineer. Not so good with genetics or people though. Not a doctor, but I am medically trained. My ex-wife's blood type is B- O+ and our child has a plus. When the pediatrician told us her blood type, my face got long and I told her, "But I'm O+." She then asked my then wife what hers was, and she exited the room. My ex-wife was the only one ignorant to what happened. Freaking sucks, but I love my child, and without that mishap I'd never have met that wonderful kid. I pay child support. I look nothing like my dad or anyone from his side, nor does my sister. We all look like my granddad. My daughter is the exact double of me. I've been told the only thing she got from my wife was her eye color. Genetics are fascinating. Oh man. Yes. Homeless man comes to the fire station many years ago and says his wife is having a baby in the bushes behind McDonald's. We tell him to go back to her and we would be right there. We call it in and respond a rescue truck, ambulance, to check it out. My partner and I get there and yup, sure enough, this woman who is laying on cardboard in the bushes of the McDonald's parking lot is crowning and pushing. The husband arrives back and is so excited. He keeps talking about being a dad. Seriously, this dude is pumped. Anyway, we barely had time to grab our equipment when the baby delivered. The man started to cry tears of joy. He kept saying, my son, I'm a father. OMG, I can't believe I have a son. Well, my partner and I both looked at each other and just didn't know what to say. Mum was lily white, and so was the dad. The child on the other hand was very African American. I know that when babies are delivered that they all look a little purple or white and it takes a little bit of time for their color to come out. This baby however looked nothing like the mother or father. It was tough to watch this man fawn over the mother and baby crying that was his baby. The terrified look on the mother's face confirmed our suspicion. Bottom line was we congratulated them and took them to the hospital. Hopefully the husband became the dad regardless of the biology going on there. The husband clearly wanted to be a father so badly. The kid was already off to a pretty rough start in life. Growing up, I look nothing like my dad, but apparently, he never had any doubts even when people said we don't look alike because we have the exact same feet size and shape. Turns out he was right all along because my jaw and head shape is an exact copy after puberty. Plus he and I can really grow facial hair. A couple comes into the men's clinic for advice on fertility. The woman already had her workup done and was fine. The guy attended this clinic to essentially have his sperm checked. So this is the setting, we have his results in hand and it says he is sterile. Both of them arrive into the office and the wife says, I don't know what you all did but I am pregnant. And she is absolutely happy and smiling. I look at my consultant, he smiles too, walks over to them both, congratulates them both and wishes them the best. Seems like there should be some sort of medical obligation to tell him he's sterile. Like don't come right out and say she's a cheating W, but at least tell the dude because that's fricked up. My neighbor is a shrimpy, white, balding guy who is married to the local TV weather girl. Their son is a big, strapping young man with dark skin and dark hair, who is a star athlete on the junior high football team. Some people think the son looks more like the wife's Native American massage therapist, but that seems like a bit of a stretch to me. I tell I would. My wife works in genetics and it's far more common than you think. Often they will fight any testing. The way the results are handled is your kid has X, which happens when both parents are carriers. Mom, your results show you are, and dad's a negative, they figure it out from there. If it's a case of dominant genes where only one parent carries, so say mom and dad aren't carriers aka real dad has it, they tell each parent separately. So often the dad doesn't know and never knows. I had delivered a baby and the bilirubin, a byproduct of blood breakdown, was high. I was explaining to the mom that it may be due to the fact that mom was O+ and baby was B+. The dad said, but my blood type is A. Q uncomfortable doctor. For the baby to have B type blood when the mom is O, dad either needs to be B or AB. Oops. The mom just said it's okay. We'll talk later, and I took my signal to back out of the room as fast as possible. On my obgyn rotation, the third baby I ever delivered was a white couple who delivered a black baby. You could hear a pin drop in the room. The husband looked at her in disgust and walked out of the room. I'm pretty sure 3 lives were ruined that day. My attending had me hand off the baby and leave the room. It was pretty awful. It was also the last baby I would deliver. I'm an internist now, so I am not a medical professional, but this is just my own personal story, and after reading the comments I decided to post. This is not about cheating either. My mom was in her early 40s and my dad was in his mid 30s and they were trying to get pregnant. After many failed attempts they decided to go the IVF route. After many more failed attempts they tried to use donor embryos. They got pregnant and had me and my 2 brothers, triplets. We are all blonde with either blue or green eyes. My parents are both brunettes with brown eyes. All throughout my childhood, and even now sometimes, people ask how did that happen when they see us compared to my parents. I was never really bothered by this and I never had any reason to question why I look nothing like my parents. My mom always told me that her dad was blonde with blue eyes, so I always assumed we got our appearances from him. Then I got to my freshman year of high school and we started talking about Punnett squares and heredity. Boy was I confused. My brothers and I also happened to all share the same class together. After school that day we asked our mom how this happened and she finally told us about the IVF and that we were actually quadruplets originally, but sadly the other baby didn't make it. Somewhat off topic, but the remarks I get about my son are utterly bizarre. Neither I nor his mother have his red hair or blue eyes, so we're always getting some variant of milkman's kid. No Karen, they're recessive genes. We both have to have them for him to exhibit those traits. It's not mixing pain FFS. Current M3. I'm about to finish my OB-GYN rotation tomorrow and so far I've enjoyed it a lot. However, related but unrelated, this one lady right after her C-section asked us if the baby was black or white because she wasn't sure who the father was. All we could say was congratulations upon the delivery because the baby was covered in white residue and amniotic fluid when it came out, so I personally couldn't tell if it was black or white from initial appearance, like 30 seconds. But that question threw us all off. The same lady right afterwards said, penetration just leads to 9 months of pain, hair loss, and balls. My brother-in-law's daughter looks mixed. Her mother's family has a history, but a paternity test was ordered as soon as he could. I got to give it to my brother-in-law though. He raised that girl to be a fine young woman, though they never had another child. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.